think one thing that you and Matt might disagree on is you guys are obviously with the Labour Party.
I'm not.
With the Labour Party, I'm quite sure.
Sorry, no, but Labour advocates.
Wait a minute, just to clarify that.
I wouldn't go that far.
critics of the Labour, I mean, I think we'd argue we'd prefer
Pragmatists.
to fight a Labour government than
pragmatists.
prefer to fight a Tory government.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Sorry, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I suppose in terms of talking about low-intensity democracy, in America, the political system in the book, Matt, to simplify, argues that it's kind of the Democrats and Republicans, two sides of the same coin. Do you see British politics, do you see a similarity there?
I mean, I think it just comes back to the same thing that Matt was saying earlier. Before I get on to answering you, I just want to pay tribute to Matt because he's an amazing journalist and he's a personal inspiration to me. He's done amazing things. He's also a really great friend, really good person, really enjoyed getting to know him professionally.
I didn't plan to say this, by the way.
And
although I would have.
Shut up, Matt. God! And the book's great. His first book, Irregular Army, is also great. It's got some great reporting. My favourite chapter is the Haiti chapter. So do read it. So now that's done. The cheque will be in the post, I presume.
Yeah.
I can answer the question. I mean, I think it sort of boils down to exactly the same thing that Matt was talking about earlier, which is that there is really just a very narrow things that you're a sort of set of ideas that you're allowed to say in public. So I'm going to take one example to illustrate what I mean by this. So this sort of sounds a bit trivial, but bear with me, is the example of the idea of rail nationalisation. So the think tank that I work for is called CLASS, because I'm not full-time at The Guardian. I also work for a think tank. And we did a poll where we found that 2 in 3 British people want rail nationalisation. But you can't really say that publicly in this country, even though 2 out of 3 people think it, without being called like a kind of mad communist and without being derided as sort of wanting to regress the country back to the 1970s and kind of destroy everything. So instead, the Labour Party, who I think really, if you asked Ed Miliband, what would you ideally like, he'd probably say want to nationalise the railways. But because public debate and sort of what is considered to be acceptable political discourse in this country is so narrow, is so neoliberal and narrow, he's come up with this completely shite policy about allowing the public sector to sort of enter into a bidding war with the private sector, which is kind of neither hither nor thither and doesn't really please anybody. But that is as far as I think he's not got enough courage and he should go further. But I mean, that is as far as he feels that he can go, and that's because, I have criticisms about the Labour leadership generally. I think that that's a failure on their part, but it is also a reflection of the fact that they feel that there's just not the political room for them to go any further. And what I wanted to make the point that we've all talked in this, or rather you've talked so far, in this debate about the media and what it's like to be a left-winger in the media. And I want to make the point that it is very hard to be a left-winger in the media. But I can tell you from personal experience, it is a million times harder if you're a woman and if you're working class like I am. It is so hard to be, I don't want to cry me a river because I'm a Guardian columnist and it's pretty sweet. But I don't have to shout at the TV. I can write a column that's going to be hopefully read by some of these assholes. And that's quite nice. Like writing about George Osborne and slagging him off is quite, there's a lot of Schadenfreude thinking that he might actually get to read it, which is a very privileged position to be in. So I don't want to, suggest that I'm kind of having a really difficult time of it. But there is a sense in the media, and I'm not singling out The Guardian because it's all across the media, where if you're not privately educated, Oxbridge, white male, middle class, then you are an outsider. And that is especially harder if that makes it even harder to be a left-winger. Because it's not just about, thanks one person. Because it's not just about, it's not just about your ideas, it's also about, like Grayson Perry said in his essay, The Rise and Fall of the Default Man, which is basically about the sort of white, middle-class, middle-aged man, heterosexual man, that if you that kind of demographic owns objectivity, that really that demographic is kind of seen as what he calls the zero longitude of identities, that if you're in that demographic, you don't have an identity. And if you deviate from that in any way, then you're sort of an outsider, then you're on the outside. And I'm working class, and well, not anymore. I'm write for The Guardian, as I said, and I live in Stoke Newington, so that ship has sailed. But I was, and I still act like I'm working class, and I still have those sensibilities, and I'm a woman. And, you know, and it's this extra battle. It's this extra battle that you have to fight to be taken seriously. You know, that you're not this kind of mad raving loon, you know. And so if you want to push ideas that are outside of the mainstream and you don't fit into what is considered to be, you know, the voice, an image of authority, an image of an objectivity, that's incredibly hard. It makes it harder for you. And obviously it's the same for people who aren't white, who aren't heterosexual, you know, like anybody who deviates from that sort of, you know, the kind of image of authority, it's very, very difficult. And what I've really learned, I've done a lot of things on Latin America, and what I've really learned is there is a lot of racism in the way that these leaders are portrayed. You know, people like Morales, people like Chavez, Maduro, Correa. You know, I'm not saying that I agree with everything that they've said and done, but I do feel that the Western way that they are portrayed is that they're often portrayed as buffoons. They're portrayed as being overly emotional. There's a lot of like Latin stereotypes that come in there of they're very kind of, you know, passionate and angry, and that they can't be sort of taken seriously because they don't fit into this sort of image of Western authority. And it is, you know, a form of racism. And I think Edward Galeano, who unfortunately passed away this week, huge towering figure on the Latin American left, you know, he did talk about in his books, The Open Veins of Latin America, about how ultimately colonialism is a form of racism. So I think these all things, you know, the economics of it all, the neoliberalist element of it, but also racism, sexism, misogyny, sexism, classism, it all comes together. And I think that is very much embedded within the racket, and I think we need to be talking about that as well. And I also think that, you know, in this country, I think because the left is so sort of fragmented, that I often feel sort of similar discrimination from the intellectual left when I don't conform to, you know, the kind of Gramsci reading, beard stroking, book groupie sort of ideal of things. Then I'm often treated as sort of frivolous and kind of idiotic, and as though I have nothing useful to contribute, even though I've probably experienced more direct oppression than that particular demographic of people. So that's the first thing that I wanted to say. Sorry, I'm rushing through this because I do have to go. Yeah. The second thing that I wanted to talk about is, you know, I totally agree with everything that's been said about the media, but I worry about our overemphasis on, you know, the media as this kind of gatekeeper. Because actually, I do think, you know, with books like Matt's being written and Owen's, that the information that is out there, you know, I know it, everybody in this room probably knows it, so it is out there. I don't think it's a question of lack of information that stops people from being active. I think three things make people active. The first is when they're compelled to be active, when they're compelled to take action because they feel that there's no other choice. And all of the activists in Colombia, and I would say that I've worked with, and other places in Latin America like Mexico, I would say that a feeling of compulsion that the situation is too unbearable to be silent is what has motivated them. But there's also a feeling of that you believe that it's going to work. And that's really important. No one will take action unless they believe that it's going to work. And I think that in this country, we are very stilted and very stunted by this total political pessimism. You know, I don't think the majority of people in this country believe that they're being listened to. They feel that politics is a total irrelevance, and they feel that it's something that's done by the you know, the default man, the demographic I was talking about earlier, that is totally irrelevant to their everyday lives. You know, watch Prime Minister's questions. You know, that doesn't seem relevant to most people's lives, and that's what politics represents to most people. So they don't take action because they don't feel that it's relevant. They don't feel they can have any impact on it. And the final thing, the thing that we never talk about, that I would really like the left to think about more, is people don't take action because often it doesn't feel fun, and it doesn't feel like a community thing. You know, I helped set up UK Uncut. I don't know if you've heard of that, the movement to oppose tax dodging. And I was very enthusiastic about it. We used to shut down high street shops like Vodafone, Topshop, that kind of thing. And I really believe, I'm very happy to blow our trumpet with this one. I really believe that the tax dodging pledges in the Labour manifesto would not be there if it wasn't for us. I really, really believe that. And the reason that I kept going back to UK Uncut week after week wasn't because I had this kind of ideological compulsion to do it, although I did believe in what we were doing. And it wasn't necessarily because I believed it was going to work, although it was exciting. It was because I just moved to London, I didn't have any friends, and those were my friends. And I felt like I was part of something bigger than myself. And I felt like I was part of something fun. I was part of a community where people shared values the same as me. I felt like I had a lifestyle with that, with doing that. It felt normalised. Activism felt normalised. And I think at the moment, political activism isn't normalised in our society. It isn't part of our everyday fabric of life. It isn't seen as enjoyable. It's seen as scary, which is obviously understandable. But I think, how do we defeat the racket? Well, those are the things we're going to have to talk about. Those are the things that we're going to have to change. Anyway, I think
No, that was amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.